From ghoulies and ghosties.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And
things that go bump in the night. Good Lord! Deliver us!
Deliver us.
Hello, spooks and spookettes. Count Drahoon here, and tonight I present to you a review for a most interesting indie horror flick known as Stop Motion. But before we dive into that, allow me to take care of the castle keeping notes. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Count Drahoon Presents. And I thank you all to those that have already done so, and if you love Count Drahoon Presents, might I suggest taking your support a little step further by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/Drahoon and pledge $5 a month so that you can get access to our exclusive Facebook page known as the Count's Lounge Lizards, where we post exclusive content, videos that are early and ad-free. And now that that's out of the way, let us get into the heart of the matter, and hopefully you won't feel the need to drive a stake through it.
What happens when it takes on a life of its own?
Stop Motion opens up on our protagonist Ella and her mother Suzanne creating their own stop animation film. Suzanne is a legend in her field but is unable to make films the way that she used to due to her arthritis and other health problems. She relies on Ella to move the stop motion figures, and we can tell that she's rather particular given that she discards hours of work simply because it's just not working. Ella waits on her mother hand and foot, but is able to sneak out after hours to be with her boyfriend and friends. She usually stays the night with him, only to wake up just before dawn so that she can sneak back into the flat and be ready to go for more stop-motion work. While working through a scene, Suzanne has a massive stroke and is immediately taken to the hospital. Ella decides to stay the night with Tom, her boyfriend, at his behest, but also decides that she is determined to finish her mother's film. Tom obliges and helps her rent out a flat so that she can use it as her own personal studio, free from any distractions. While working on the movie, Ella is visited by a mysterious young girl who makes her way into the flat. She is intrigued by the setup, but thinks that the Cyclops story that her mother has come up with is rather boring, so she volunteers a new story that Ella should make for her stop-motion film. She pitches a new story that is to be broken up in 3 parts. Part 1 deals with a girl running through the forest, being chased by an unknown assailant. She makes her way into an abandoned bungalow, hopefully able to evade him entirely. But the unknown assailant, known later as the Ash Man, is able to find the bungalow, sees the girl through the window, and attempts to barge in. Now, the girl in the flat makes an unusual creative contribution to Ella's film. She thinks that the wax figure is not creepy enough, so she suggests that Ella remake the model out of the wax and raw meat. She also suggests that the model for the Ashman should be the carcass of a dead fox located in the forest next to the apartment complex. Ella is okay with the meaty model for the girl, but not so much for the roadkill. But the little girl is insistent that the dead fox must be used for the film, or else she refuses to help Ella complete her story. Later on, Ella decides to go to a party at Tom's flat. She decides to take his sister Polly's advice and use hallucinogenic drugs to help improve her creativity. I'm not recommending that you do that. I'm just saying that this is a plot point. The mysterious young girl actually makes her way into Ella's hallucinogenic trip and finally convinces her to use the dead fox as the model for the Ashman. The mysterious young girl then unveils part 2 of the story. The Ashman breaks in and touches the girl in the bungalow. Ella doesn't like this plot point at all and decides that the girl will actually escape the bungalow. Later on, Ella has a horrible nightmare in which she is turned into the model of the girl in her stop-motion film. She has shrunken down into a room that seems to be made of gold velvet, and there the Ashman breaks in and touches her. By the way, I should make this clear. I'm not using an innuendo. The Ashman doesn't really do anything aside from just touching her. It's still creepy, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm not implying anything a little bit more serious, given the gravity that this girl is being pursued by a gross monster called the Ashman. Anyway, back to the review. At this point in the film, Ella's stop-motion film, her dreams, and reality seem to be converging all together, and Ella is unsure which is real and which is simply a figment of her imagination. Tom is becoming a bit concerned that Ella is overworking herself. He takes her out for a nice brunch and convinces her to take a new job at Polly's marketing firm, but to no avail. It really doesn't help the fact that Polly stole some of Ella's preliminary work from the stop-motion movie and tried to pass it off as her own for their new marketing campaign. Ella is livid and literally destroys the set and walks off the job. That was actually the most frustrating part of the movie for me, because I kind of got the impression that Polly had a serious lesbian crush on Ella. And forget the fact that she's crushing on her brother's girlfriend, but the fact that she literally stole her work and tried to pass it off as her own, and meanwhile she's trying to get in her pants. Come on! That's a douche move. Ella's mother, Suzanne, finally passes away in the hospital. And this is where things really start to go downhill. Ella has violent hallucinations, believing that the Ashman is actually pursuing her in real life. Tom finds her in a manic state. Thinking that she is on the verge of a psychotic breakdown, he rushes her to the hospital. While in the hospital, Tom tries to convince her to end the project. This sets up for a very testy exchange between Ella and Tom. Ella basically calls Tom out and says that he's not a real musician, that he likes to play pretend, but that she's actually accomplishing what she wants to accomplish. Of course, this pushes Tom away, and he's seriously considering ending the relationship there, but then Ella seemingly pulls herself together and decides that she will end the film and destroy the set herself. Ella is released from the hospital and makes her way to the flat where she finds the little girl waiting for her. Ella attacks the little girl and strangles her to death. The girl gets up moments later and seems to shake it off as if nothing happened. The little girl convinces Ella to finish the film, but that the Ashman model needs to be bloodier and more disgusting. So Ella basically digs into the leg wound that she sustained during her manic episode. And while she's digging into her leg, I guess trying to rip out her leg bone, Tom and Polly find her mutilating herself and try to stop her and hold her down. She ends up killing both of them and using their bodies for life-size models for the girl and the Ashman. The Ashman model comes to life and starts stalking Ella, but Ella insists that this is not part of the story. Ella lets the Ashman attack her, but her face is no longer flesh, but made of the same mortician's wax that she uses to create stop-motion models. The final scene transitions into Ella walking into the bungalow, where the mysterious young girl is waiting for her, reviewing the footage that has been shot for the stop-motion film. The footage is of Ella bleeding out, dying in the middle of the flat, and the little girl seems satisfied as to the finished product. Ella smiles as she steps into the room laced with gold velvet that now appears to be a coffin, and the lid of that coffin finally closes and ends the picture. Stop motion was the directorial debut of Robert Morgan, who previously worked as a stop-motion animator. And with that little nugget of knowledge, that makes a whole lot of sense. I felt like the best part of this film was the creepy stop-motion animation. Even Suzanne's neglected Cyclops project seemed very appealing to me. The grotesqueness of the models reminded me of Phil Tippett's recent film Mad God, which is available on Shudder. It's interesting because Ebert actually panned this film for not being substantive enough. Substantive. I cannot say that word. Substantive. Ebert didn't think this movie was good enough, but I beg to differ. This film was about the artist's dilemma of putting oneself so much into their work that the lines of imagination and reality become too blurred and too dangerous. Trust me, I have been making movies and other content for many years. You do go crazy. And if you haven't yet, you will go crazy. Guaranteed. Granted, surreal, ambiguous films aren't for everyone. I know that this movie won't be everyone's cup of tea, and most people do prefer a traditional formula. I love ambiguous films, particularly ambiguous horror films, if done right, and I think this particular film does it right because it's about an internal conflict. You can't apply linear storytelling to dream logic, so in order to tell a film that is really supposed to convey a mood or express a dilemma, this is the route that you want to go. So that's why I'm a big fan of the writing of this film. I think the directing of this film is solid. It's evident in the pacing because it is slow but very deliberate. It makes for a nice slow burn that is very reminiscent of those classic old school psychological horror films, and it leaves you scratching your head for all of the right reasons. Of course, the cast is phenomenal. Hats off to Aisling Françoisi, who was in The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and Cowlin Springen. I am so sorry in advance if I botched those names, but she played the little girl. They played their parts extraordinarily well. I enjoyed how subtly unsettling that the little girl was in this film, and Aisling's descension into madness was just absolutely spot on. I'm not sure that this film is reinventing the wheel, but I enjoyed it. It's a solid indie horror flick, and I want to do my part to spread the word about good films being made in this day and age. So, if you haven't checked it out already, be sure to be on the lookout for Stop Motion. It isn't playing in theaters anymore, but it will be available on Shudder as of May 31st. I hope you enjoyed my review of Stop Motion, but unfortunately that's all the time I have this evening. Be sure to stay tuned for more Count Drahoon Presents. Until then, as far as things go when things go bump in the night, there are such things.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
From ghoulies and ghosties.
And long-leggedy beasties.
And
long-legged
beasties.
And
things that go bump in the night. Good Lord! Deliver us!
Deliver us.